National Security Advisor Michael Flynn resigned on Monday. His resignation letter reads as follows. In the course of my duties as the incoming National Security Advisor, I held numerous phone calls with foreign counterparts, ministers, and ambassadors. These calls were to facilitate a smooth transition and begin to build the necessary relationship between the president, his advisors, and foreign leaders. Such calls are standard practice in any transition of this magnitude. Unfortunately, because of the fast pace of events, I inadvertently briefed the vice president-elect and others with incomplete information regarding my phone calls with the Russian ambassador. I have sincerely apologized to the president and the vice president, and they have accepted my apology. It's worth noting that an FBI investigation of Flynn's contacts with Russia during the campaign concluded that Flynn would not face legal quandaries. Flynn resigned purportedly because he misled Mike Pence about the nature of his conversation with a Russian ambassador.
The key here in that resignation is very simple. It's that the Vice President, Mike Pence, was misled by General Flynn, or General Flynn could not completely recall what his conversations had been.
We know the nature of the conversation because excerpts were selectively leaked by CIA spooks to the Washington Post. The Washington Post report that's making the rounds asserts Flynn urged Russia not to overreact to the penalties being imposed by President Barack Obama, making clear that the two sides would be in a position to review the matter after Trump was sworn in as president. Russian Ambassador Kislyak was left with the impression the sanctions would be revisited at a later time. What's the big deal? An incoming administration speaking with an international ally is not illegal or improper. The previous administration imposed vindictive measures against Russia for supposedly hacking the 2016 US election, something that has never been proven. So Flynn basically saying, hey, don't overreact, we'll take a look at this once Trump's in office, is actually wise. Trump firing Flynn because of this is strange. These leaks are the main source of leftist hysteria regarding Michael Flynn's resignation, despite the fact that there's zero evidence corroborating their belief that the call to Russia was nefarious. The left is revamping their efforts to peddle a nefarious Russian spin because it gives them leverage over President Trump, knowing that it forces establishment Republicans to distance themselves from him, fearing they'd be accused of abetting a so-called Russian conspiracy. Forget the fact that two-time failed presidential candidate Clinton repeatedly compromised national security. Leftists want Americans to know that this isn't about petty politics, it's about national security. But see, frothing at the mouth for impeachment and comparing this to Iran-Contra, Watergate, and 9/11 before a shred of evidence is offered tells a different story. It's political. There's absolutely no evidence indicating that Flynn's call to Russia was nefarious or unlawful, so the left is forced to reference the Logan Act, a law that has been invoked once in history, and its constitutionality is widely doubted in any event, even by left-leaning scholars. As the editor-in-chief of the Daily Wire pointed out,
the Logan Act suggests that private citizens can't go around forming their own foreign policy. So it was formed, I think it was 1799 is when the Logan Act was created. And it was created when a member of the government went to France to try and negotiate an actual separate peace in the middle of a war between the British and the French. And the government said you can't do that.
So if anyone actually violated the Logan Act, it would have been the Democrat from Hawaii, Tulsi Gabbard, who personally visited the president of Syria. However, I'm not in the business of making weak, unprosecutable cases. The national media is also taking full advantage of this Flynn fiasco, using it as a vindication for past disparagement, a bludgeon in their continued war with the president.
A big moment for investigative journalism. Right. This has been a story led by the Washington Post, the New York Times, the CNNs of the world. If it weren't for journalists digging into this, we wouldn't know about it. So when you hear about anonymous sources, when you hear about leaks from the White House or from the government, this is what that's so important for.
The reality is, however, this is nothing more than another hysteria campaign against Russia. For example, Chuck Todd claimed that the revelation that Flynn talked to an ally is comparable somehow to Iran-Contra.
Good evening, I'm Chuck Todd here in Washington. Welcome to MTP Daily and welcome to day one of what is arguably the biggest presidential scandal involving a foreign government since Iran-Contra. Take a breath, hyperbole aside, folks. Hunker down, because this is a Class 5 political hurricane that's hitting Washington.
And the problem with these hyperbolic claims is now anchors like Todd are forced to make the story live up to expectations regardless of what the facts actually are. The national media will amp up coverage to prove these expectations right. After all, they wouldn't want to be catastrophically wrong about something again. These two widely circulated pieces published by CNN and the New York Times are worth addressing. Keep in mind that there's nothing necessarily incorrect about the claims within the article. The problem lies in the utterly misleading headlines. Trump aides spoke to Russians during campaign. This puts an image of nefarious, scary collusion between the Trump administration and Russia. But if you actually read the article, which a lot of people don't do, They acknowledge that aid speaking to allies like Russia is normal and customary. Quote, officials emphasize that communications between campaign staff and representatives of foreign governments are not unusual. So the story is not particularly important and not remotely worthy of a what the fuck, which seems to be the running tone of much of the left at the moment. Here's the other headline. Trump campaigns had repeated contacts with Russian intelligence. The headline again implies that the Trump campaign had some sort of unlawful, nefarious contact with Russian intelligence. But if we read the article, the intelligence agencies then sought to learn whether the Trump campaign was colluding with the Russians on the hacking or other efforts to influence the election. So far, they had seen no evidence of such cooperation. So basically a non-story. Yes, we should find out the reason why Flynn was fired for such a harmless act, but largely ignoring the active collusion between the intelligence community and the Washington Post is irresponsible. What the national media seems to be continually glossing over is the fact that the intelligence community is systematically attempting to undermine their president through the tsunami of leaks emerging from the White House. This is directly related to Trump's negative comments against the CIA, one of which likened the CIA to Nazis. Definitely hyperbolic, but we should never forget the deep history of politically driven deception and subversion that the CIA engages in. And the CIA has been vehemently against Trump from the start. Now that he's president, it's clear they're doing everything in their power to undermine him.
When Trump went after the intelligence community, they took his measure, and you're going to see stuff come out again and again and again. And it's not going to get easier.
The Wall Street Journal reported that they're actually withholding information from him. No matter what your political leanings are, this is deeply troubling. Obama-appointed intelligence community leaders, commonly referred to as the deep state, along with the national media, have led a deceptive campaign against Flynn. As Congressman Devin Nunes put it, Flynn is only the appetizer, Trump is the entree. The most irritating part of this whole story is the myriad of leftists who are praising deep state power plays against a democratically elected president just because they dislike Trump and his policies. The terrifying thing here is the only people able to stand up to Trump so far are the denizens of the deep state. They would not be singing the same tune if Clinton were in office and Republican operatives were selectively leaking information in an attempt to undermine her. These selective leaks are undoubtedly politically motivated given the benign nature of their contents. When an unaccountable group like the CIA can destroy someone's career with blackmail, that's extraordinarily dangerous. Simply put, one unelected group can essentially force an administration to do their bidding with a threat of selectively releasing information that may not reveal criminality but would be embarrassing or misleading, similar to what the FBI did with Martin Luther King during the Civil Rights Movement. Eli Lake of Bloomberg puts it this way. The New York Times and Washington Post reported that the transcript of the phone call reviewed over the weekend by the White House could be read different ways. Selectively disclosing the details of private conversations monitored by the FBI or NSA gives the permanent state the power to destroy reputations from the cloak of anonymity. This is what police states do.
Look, we cannot have our intelligence agencies eavesdropping on Americans and releasing it to the press. We have extremely elaborate procedures. This is the exact opposite of that, and it is scary because it means everybody who communicates with a foreigner is subject to being exposed by his own government.
That when he's talking on the phone with a world leader, that when he's making key decisions that are in the interest of protecting this country, that we have to wonder whether or not people who work for our government, who are entrusted with classified information and decisional-based materials, are leaking that information out. That, I do believe, is a big story.
All that being said, we are missing information. Why did Trump fire Flynn? No one knows. Normally, Trump sticks by his people. Maybe he just didn't want Flynn associated with the White House anymore because of the unnecessary controversy. But firing him caused more controversy. Trump didn't seem to have issues with the thick cloud of controversy surrounding Flynn when he chose him in the first place. Trump also knew Flynn misled the president weeks ago, so why didn't he fire him then if it was that big of a deal? Some argue Priebus and the Republican establishment wanted Flynn ousted, but why would they hurt Republicans' reputation in the process? Did Flynn actually do something unlawful? If the Flynn phone call transcripts are as devastating as CIA Director John Brennan anonymously says they are, he should release those transcripts for the American people, but there's no indication he will. Ultimately, what this story does reveal is a dysfunctional, disorderly White House where members mislead and don't talk to each other. It speaks to the hypocrisy of leftists denouncing so-called authoritarianism while championing deep state plays. It also speaks to the increasingly rabid nature of the national media, salivating at even the slightest misstep by the Trump administration. If Trump wants his policy objectives to be achieved, his administration needs to get their act together fast.
the girl